Welcome to our Back to the Future interview series. In this series, we interview inside professionals and leaders from around the world, and together with them, we discover what the future might hold. Today, my Hong Kong-based colleague and fellow managing partner, Scott Lee, is having an interesting conversation with Walter Lee, who is Head of Insights at Cathay Pacific Airways.
We've never been as consumer-centric as we are now. We all became much more consumer-centric when countries locked down due to COVID-19. How will we keep this up post-lockdown? What's your thoughts on this first topic?
I think, first of all, I would agree with the sentiment or the notion that companies and organizations have become a lot more customer-centric in the last 6 months. The situation kind of forces us to be more customer-centric, right? When you have limited resources, when your budgets have been slashed, you kind of have to pick and choose and prioritize what's the most important for the business and also what the customers urgently need. So it's a good balance between business objectives, business goals, and also customer objectives. And that's really what customer centricity should be about. So it's actually sped up that process, and we've all been pushed and forced to find really agile ways of dealing with that and coming up with really customer-centric solutions to, number one, sort of maintain the business, to bring in other sort of streams of revenue. Number two, to sort of address the concerns that for us, for example, how do we address passenger concerns about flying in this day and age for the flights that we still operate? So it's really forced companies like us to be customer-centric. Now, whether or not this will stay after COVID's gone in the next year or two remains to be seen. But I think what COVID has really done is forced everyone to become more customer-centric. And I think some of the things that we've done, some of the learnings that we take away from all of this is here to stay. But I do feel personally that perhaps everything's moving in the right direction, but then some of that sort of rush towards being customer-centric and being really agile will sort of fade out as the virus comes under control. But in general, I think everyone's sort of moving in the direction when it comes to being more customer-centric, that's for sure.
Okay, great. So if I can summarize, you agree things are getting more customer-centric. It's a way to prioritize. Of course, there's the intersection between business and what the consumers, the customers want. But yes, by necessity, COVID-19 has forced the business to really focus on what are the challenges to keep customers wanting to fly, and so there is a boost. The question remains: will it sink back a little bit? Although overall you feel there will be greater focus on consumer centricity. Creativity as a core capability. Is creativity the number one capability to survive and thrive after a crisis? What's your view on that?
I think in general, yes, creativity will be very critical, especially at this point, but also after we control the pandemic. But I'd add to that, I'd say it's innovation as opposed to just pure creativity, because the difference between creativity and innovation is what we said earlier, is the alignment and the intersection between business objectives and customer needs. And the third part to that is execution, being able to execute and scale whatever you've come up with in an effective manner. So whilst creativity is great, coming up with a lot of ideas to address customer concerns in this day and age, and also trying to come up with new business models and experiences for customers post-COVID, how many of those things are really practical once things really return to normal, and when you're really trying to build back up the business to become more sustainable? I think that's going to force a lot of leaders, people doing research, insights professionals, to really think hard about. It's about the practicality of the idea, the scalability of the idea and the execution as well. And COVID has really forced us to do more of that as well.
Okay, so if I can summarize, then yes, again, creativity is more important. As you say, it's an era of a new era of problem solving and so on, but not just creativity for the sake of creativity. It's people and organizations are facing real practical challenges as well, so it's got to be translated into practical innovation as well. It's got to be scaled and executed, so there's a I guess a frame of reference around creativity. Focus on new online experiences. Do the ramifications of COVID-19, such as crowds being afraid of crowds, require rethinking the consumer journey? How can brands still establish strong consumer relationships in a digital CX-driven culture?
I think this is a very interesting problem to tackle, how brands can continue to stay relevant through new experiences. One of the things that COVID has put a lot of brands in, for us especially as an airline, as a travel industry sort of player, is that once there's no travel, there's no engagement with your brand. There's zero engagement. There's zero reasons for people to go on your website and start searching for flights again because all the countries are on lockdown. So how do you stay relevant outside of your own bubble, outside of your own vertical, and outside of your own industry? And that sort of forces everyone to think of new experiences, whether it's, for us, for example, redemption options for non-travel related experiences, or trying to plan for travel in the future. You're trying to stay relevant, and you're trying to stay in consumers' minds. So there's a blurring of lines between industries almost. Airlines are trying to do more than just being an airline, more than just being a transport brand. Hotels are trying to do more than just being a hospitality brand. It's more than just accommodation. So everyone's trying to go into and venture into new sort of fields in order to ensure that they can stay in front of the consumer, stay in front of the customer, but also most importantly is to become a very sustainable business if something like this happens again. And whilst we're all trying to do this, we're also trying to balance and struggle with finding the right sort of harmony between digitalization and more sort of, I almost want to say, primitive ways of delivering new experiences, because digitalization comes at a huge cost, something that most businesses at the current time just cannot afford. And it's going to be like that for the next 2 to 3 years, perhaps. And so, again, goes back to prioritization. What is it that you need to digitize? If you take airlines, for example, we talk about touchless surfaces in the times of the pandemic. Can you truly afford to digitize everything to that extent? And the answer is obviously no. I don't think that many airlines can do that or can afford to do that. And we're also limited by the technology that's available to this industry. So it's going to be a process, but at least everyone will be thinking, it's going to be top of mind, how you should plan for that and how you should prioritize for that, and start thinking, how do you go beyond your traditional revenue streams and your traditional sort of arena in terms of where you find your customers and engage them.
Great. So that's fantastic. So if I can summarize again, yes, it sounds like that there is a focus on new experiences simply because you've been forced to try and engage beyond the immediate travel experience to stay relevant, as you say, to customers through more than just travel. But you've also noted that, yeah, sure, there's a drive towards digitization, of course, but it's somehow got to be again practical in terms of the investments that can be made in the short to mid to long term, I guess, and needs to be sustainable as well. So and reality is that one can get carried away, I guess, with too much digitization when people just want to know say the plane's clean or something like that, you know, so there's always a balance and the priorities that you talked about.
This very interesting conversation between Walter and Scott shows us that today in business, three things are very important. First of all, probably more than ever, businesses need to focus on customer needs. They need to have the customer insights. Secondly, they need creativity within the business to turn those insights into unique solutions and experiences that will wow their customers. And probably today, more than ever before, you need to make use of digital to make that happen. And then thirdly, finally, we have business agility that is needed to scale those solutions fast and make them a true success.